My name is Elena Marchetti. I'm 29 years old. 3 weeks ago, my mother walked into the lobby of Hartwell Financial Group in downtown Chicago, asked for my boss by name, and told him I had been stealing from the company for 14 months. She handed him a folder. She said the words embezzlement and fraud twice each. She smiled the whole time. What my mother didn't know was that my boss, Marcus Hartwell, had already watched the security footage. All of it. Every camera, every timestamp, every one of the 47 visits my brother made to our office after hours over those same 14 months. Marcus had watched my brother log into my workstation using my stolen credentials. He had watched him transfer $312,000 across 23 transactions into a shell account registered to my mother's maiden name. He had watched him wipe his hands on my chair before leaving. My mother didn't know any of that when she walked in with her folder. She didn't know Marcus had been waiting 3 weeks for someone in my family to make the first move. She didn't know I had been sleeping in a hotel for a month. She didn't know the FBI field office on Roosevelt Road had a case number with my brother's name on it. She thought she was ending my career. She was ending her own family. Before I take you there, if stories like this one matter to you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read every single one. Now let me take you back 4 years, to the first Sunday dinner where I understood exactly what kind of family I was born into. I was 25. I had just been promoted to Senior Analyst at Hartwell Financial Group, a boutique wealth management firm that handled roughly $4.2 billion in private client assets. I had been with the firm for 18 months. I had outperformed every analyst in my cohort. Marcus Hartwell, the founder, had personally signed the promotion letter. My salary had jumped from $72,000 to $118,000. I drove to my parents' house in Oak Park that Sunday with the letter folded in my purse, because I was 25, and I still believed my father might be proud. My brother Dominic was already in the kitchen when I arrived. He was 31. He lived in the basement. He had lived in the basement since his restaurant in Logan Square closed in 2019, taking $340,000 of my parents' savings with it. He was wearing a polo shirt I had bought him for Christmas. He did not say hello. My mother, Gianna, was stirring Sunday gravy on the stove. She lifted her cheek to be kissed without looking at me. My father, Silvio, was reading the Chicago Tribune at the dining room table. He did not look up either. I sat down. I waited for one of them to ask how my week had been. Nobody asked. Dominic opened a beer. He told a long story about a consulting project he was supposedly working on. The project had no name. The client had no name. The amount he was being paid had no number. My mother laughed at every pause. My father set down the paper and said, "That's my son. Always thinking big." Then he picked up the paper again. I waited for the story to end. When it ended, I said, "I got promoted this week." My mother turned the burner down. She said, "That's nice, honey." She did not turn around. My father said, "Senior Analyst now?" I said yes. He said, "So you're what, counting other people's money?" Dominic laughed. My mother laughed. My father smiled at his own joke and went back to the Tribune. I sat with the letter still folded in my purse. I did not take it out. I ate the gravy. I drove home. That night, I wrote one sentence in the notebook I had started keeping in college. The notebook was a green composition book I had bought for $1.29 at a Walgreens on Clark Street. The sentence was this: "They will never ask the question that would make the answer matter." I closed the book. I put it on the shelf. I did not know yet that I would fill 3 more before this story ended. Let me tell you about my family, because the geometry of it matters. My father Silvio was 61. He ran a small commercial insurance brokerage in River Forest that he had inherited from his father in 1998. The brokerage had been slowly failing for 12 years. My father did not believe it was failing. He believed it was in transition. My mother Gianna was 58. She had not worked outside the home since 1989. She ran the family. Everyone agreed on this, including my father, who deferred to her on every decision except money, which he refused to discuss with anyone. My brother Dominic was the golden child. He had been the golden child since the day he was born, 7 years before me. He had been a promising baseball player in high school. He had been a promising culinary student at Kendall College. He had been a promising line cook at 2 restaurants in River North. He had been a promising restaurant owner for 14 months before the business collapsed under $340,000 in debt that my parents had co-signed without telling me. Dominic had been promising for 31 years. The word had become his occupation. I was the afterthought. I had not been planned. My mother told me this regularly, the way other mothers told their daughters they were beautiful. "You were a surprise, Elena. A happy surprise, but a surprise." She would laugh when she said it. My father would look at the ceiling. Dominic would smile. I was 7 years younger, 4 inches shorter, and quieter by a full register. I had graduated summa cum laude from the University of Illinois with a double major in finance and accounting. Nobody had attended the ceremony. My mother had a dentist appointment that could not be rescheduled. My father was covering for an employee. Dominic was on a spiritual retreat in Sedona that was, I learned later, funded entirely by a credit card in my mother's name. I paid for graduate school myself. I worked full-time at a regional bank in Champaign while earning my MBA at night. I graduated in 2019 with $41,000 in debt and a job offer from Hartwell Financial in Chicago. I moved into a studio apartment in Ukrainian Village. I paid my loans on time every month. I did not ask my parents for help, because I had learned by then that help was a currency they kept in a separate account, one I did not have access to. Marcus Hartwell had founded Hartwell Financial in 2007. He was 54 when I met him. He was the kind of man who remembered the name of the building's night security guard and sent flowers to his wife when she was sick. He had built the firm from 3 clients and a rented desk in a co-working space on Wacker Drive. By the time I joined, Hartwell Financial had 31 employees, 2 floors of an office building on LaSalle Street, and a reputation in Chicago private wealth circles for being the cleanest, quietest, most ethically obsessive firm in the city. Marcus hired slowly. He fired almost never. He paid for every employee's annual physical. He knew the names of their kids. He interviewed me for 90 minutes the first time we met. He asked me about my family. I said my father was in insurance and my brother was in hospitality. I did not say that my brother lived in my parents' basement and had lost $340,000 of their savings. I did not say that my mother kept a running tally of every gift she had ever given me and referenced it at every holiday. Marcus watched my face when I answered. He said, "Elena, I hire based on character. Skills I can teach. Character shows itself under pressure." I said I understood. He hired me 2 days later. For 3 years, I did my job and went home. I did not date seriously. I did not make close friends at work. I had Nina Okonkwo, my best friend since freshman year of college, who lived in Logan Square with her wife Priya and called me every Sunday. That was enough. I did not need more. My work was clean and careful and steadily excellent, and Marcus noticed. He promoted me 3 times in 4 years. By the time I was 28, I was one of 2 senior analysts reporting directly to him. I handled $340 million in client assets. I had client authentication credentials. I had access to the wire transfer system. I had a corner desk on the 31st floor that looked out over the river. I told my family none of this in any detail. Not because I was hiding it, but because they had never once asked a follow-up question. My mother introduced me at parties as my daughter, she works at a bank. That was the entire description. For 3 years, it was the entire description. Then Dominic started coming to my apartment. It was a Tuesday in March, 2 years ago. He showed up at 8 p.m. without calling first. He was holding a bottle of wine and a box of cannoli from the Italian bakery on Grand Avenue. He had not visited me in the 3 years I had lived in Chicago. I opened the door and said, "What's wrong?" He laughed. He said, "Why does something have to be wrong for me to see my little sister?" I let him in. He sat on my couch. He looked around my apartment for a full minute. He said, "This place is nice. You're doing better than I thought." The sentence landed exactly the way he meant it to. He drank the wine. He ate most of the cannoli. He asked me 3 questions about my job. They were specific questions. What was my title? What system did we use for client records? Who had administrator access? I answered the first question. I changed the subject on the other 2. He laughed and said, "Okay, corporate robot." He left at 11. I wrote in the notebook that night. Dominic came over. He asked about systems. Something is wrong. A week later, he came again. This time he brought my mother. She had never visited my apartment before. She had said once, when I asked her to come for my housewarming, that Ukrainian village made her nervous. She sat on my couch with her purse in her lap and asked where I kept my tax returns. I said, "Why?" She said, "Your father wants to help you with your finances." My father had never once in my life shown interest in my finances. I said, "I'm fine, Mom. I use an accountant." She pressed her lips together. She said, "You're being secretive, Elena. It's unbecoming." After she left, Dominic lingered. He asked to use my bathroom. He was in there for 11 minutes. When he came out, he said he had gotten a work call. I nodded. I walked him to the door. After he left, I went into the bathroom. The medicine cabinet was slightly open. My passport had been in the top drawer. It was still there. But the drawer underneath, which held my social security card and my employee ID badge for Hartwell Financial, was also slightly open. I had not opened it in weeks. I sat on the edge of the tub. I felt very cold. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Dominic was my brother, that he had no reason to want my employee ID, that I was reading into things. I closed both drawers. I checked that everything was where it should be. Everything was where it should be. I went to bed. I slept badly. A month later, I got an email from Hartwell's IT department. It was a routine notice. Someone had logged into my workstation from inside the office at 11:47 p.m. on a Saturday. Was this me? I stared at the email for a long time. I had not been in the office that Saturday. I had been at Nina's apartment for her birthday. I had photos with timestamps. I had a receipt from an Uber I had taken home at 1:15 a.m. I replied to the email. I said yes, that was me. I said I had come in to finish a client report. I lied because I did not know yet what I was covering up, and I did not want to find out at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday with the IT director copied. That night, I called Nina. I told her everything. Dominic's visit. My mother's visit. The open drawer. The login at 11:47. She listened for 20 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Elena, your brother is stealing from your company using your credentials." I started crying. She said, "Stop crying. Start documenting." Nina is a litigation attorney at a firm on Michigan Avenue. She bills at $720 an hour. She was giving me her advice for free, at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday, because she had met my brother once at a Christmas party 3 years earlier and told me that night, in the Uber home, that he had the dead eyes of a man who would burn your house down for insurance money and cry at the funeral. She had been right, and I had laughed, and I had not taken her seriously enough. That night, I started a second notebook. A black one this time, Moleskine, $18.95 at the bookstore on Milwaukee Avenue. I wrote down every date I could remember that Dominic had been near my apartment. I wrote down every question my mother had asked about my job. I wrote down every login alert I had received. I wrote down the exact location of every piece of identification I owned. 2 days later, I booked a private meeting room on our firm's 32nd floor. I downloaded my own access logs. I cross-referenced every login against my personal calendar. I found 6 after-hours logins over a 4-month period that I could not account for. 6 sessions where someone using my credentials had logged into Hartwell's client management system late at night, on weekends, when I had been verifiably somewhere else. I sat in that conference room at 7:30 p.m. on a Thursday with a printout of my own logins, and I understood 2 things at once. The first was that my brother was almost certainly committing federal wire fraud using my name. The second was that if I walked into Marcus Hartwell's office the next morning and told him, I would look like either a fool or an accomplice, and I did not yet know which one I could prove. I called Nina. I said, "What do I do?" She said, "Elena, you need a lawyer who isn't me. You need evidence he doesn't know you have. And you need to decide right now, before anything else happens, whether you are going to protect your brother or yourself. You cannot do both." I sat in that conference room for another hour. I watched the lights of the Wrigley building across the river. I thought about my mother introducing me as my daughter, she works at a bank. I thought about Dominic laughing on my couch, drinking my wine, asking who had administrator access. I thought about my father saying, "So you're what, counting other people's money?" while my mother laughed. I opened the notebook. I wrote one sentence. I am not going to protect him. I closed the notebook. I turned off the conference room lights. I went home. I did not sleep. The next morning, I called a criminal defense attorney named Abraham Feldman whose number Nina had sent me at 6:14 a.m. I met him in his office on Dearborn Street at 11 a.m. I paid his $3,500 retainer with a cashier's check. He was 68 years old. He had been a federal prosecutor for 14 years before switching sides. He listened to my entire story without taking a single note. When I finished, he said, "Elena, I want you to do 3 things and nothing else until I tell you otherwise. Change every password you own. Buy a second phone, cash only, no contract. And tell no one in your family that you know. Not your mother. Not your father. Not a cousin. Not a priest. Do you understand?" I said yes. He said, "Good. Because the next move is theirs. And when they make it, I want them to believe you are exactly what they think you are." I walked out of his office at 12:47 p.m. The sun was out. The Loop was full of people eating lunch. I stopped at a coffee cart on the corner of Dearborn and Madison. I ordered a black coffee. I paid in cash. The woman behind the cart smiled at me and said, "Have a beautiful day." I thanked her. I drank the coffee walking back to my office. I took the elevator to the 31st floor. I sat down at my desk. I opened my email. I answered 23 messages in a row, clean and professional, and nobody who walked past my desk that afternoon would have guessed that my hands had stopped shaking only 4 minutes before. That was 10 months ago. Everything that happened between that afternoon and the moment my mother walked into Marcus Hartwell's lobby 3 weeks ago, I'm going to tell you now. Because the part where my family thought they had won, the part where they handed Marcus that folder and smiled, is the part that looks like the ending. It wasn't. It was the middle. The ending came later. It came quietly. And it came with a single sentence from a man my family had never heard of, in a conference room my mother had not known existed, with a woman sitting next to him whose name they would learn for the first time that afternoon. Her name was mine. Abraham Feldman told me on the second day I worked with him that the hardest part of any federal fraud case was not the evidence. The evidence, he said, was easy. The hardest part was keeping the subject of the fraud from tipping off the suspect before the evidence was complete. I had to keep living my life. I had to keep going to Sunday dinner. I had to keep laughing at Dominic's jokes about consulting. I had to keep kissing my mother's cheek without flinching. He said, "Elena, you are going to hate every minute of the next 6 months. But 6 months from now, you will know exactly who your family is, and they will not know who you are. That is an advantage most victims never get." I went to Sunday dinner the next week. I smiled. I ate my gravy. I asked Dominic about his consulting project. He said it was going great. He was wearing a new watch. A Tag Heuer, silver face, black leather strap. I knew the watch. It retailed at $3,400. My mother touched it with one finger and said, "Our boy works hard." My father nodded at the television. I asked Dominic where he got it. He said a client had given it to him as a thank you gift. I said, "Wow, lucky you." I went home that night and wrote the date, the watch, the exact retail price, and my mother's sentence into the notebook. The same week, I met with Abraham and a forensic accountant named Wen-Lu, who Abraham had worked with on 3 prior federal cases. One was 42. She had been a senior investigator for the SEC for 11 years before going independent. She charged $450 an hour. Abraham said she was worth every dollar. I signed her retainer. I handed her a thumb drive with my access logs, my calendar records, and 6 months of my personal bank statements. She thanked me. She said, "Elena, I need you to understand something before we go further. If your brother is doing what we think he is not doing it alone. This kind of scheme needs a place to move the money. That means a bank account. That means documents. That means someone else with a social security number. We are going to find that person. I need you to be ready for who it is." I nodded. I already knew. 3 weeks later, Wen called me at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. She said, "Elena, can you come to my office today?" I took an Uber to her office on Wabash. She had 3 monitors set up. She had a folder open on her desk. She said, "Your brother opened a business account at a credit union in Cicero 14 months ago. The LLC is called Marchetti Consulting Solutions. The registered agent is your mother, Gianna Marchetti, using her maiden name, Gianna Russo. The account has received 23 incoming wires from Hartwell Financial client accounts over the last 13 months, totaling $312,400. I did not say anything for a full minute. Wen waited. She did not rush me. When I could speak, I said, "My mother signed for it." Wen said, "Your mother is a co-signer. Your brother is the primary. But your mother's signature is on the account opening documents." She was there. She sat in a chair at that credit union and she signed her maiden name on a business account her son opened to receive stolen money. I walked outside. I sat on a bench on Wabash Avenue. It was 39 degrees. I did not feel cold. I called Nina. I told her what Wen had just told me. Nina was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Elena, your mother knew. She has always known. She is not an accessory. She is a partner." I said, "I know." She said, "You sound calm." I said, "I am calm." She said, "That worries me more than if you were screaming." I said, "I will scream later. Right now I have work to do." I went back upstairs. Wen had printed the wire records. I looked at the dates. I looked at the amounts. The wires ranged from $4,800 to $28,900. Small enough not to trigger automatic compliance flags. Varied enough to look like routine consulting payments. They had been wired from 7 different Hartwell client accounts, all of them belonging to older clients who rarely checked their monthly statements. One of the clients was 84 years old. One was 91. One had died 9 months ago, and the family had not yet closed the account, and my brother had taken $11,200 from a dead woman's portfolio in July. I did not cry until I got home. Then I cried for 90 minutes on my bathroom floor. Then I stood up. I washed my face. I made tea. I called Abraham. I said, "What do we do next?" He said, "Elena, we go to Marcus Hartwell." We went the following Tuesday. Abraham came with me. Len came with me. I had told Marcus's assistant only that I needed 30 minutes of his time for a personal legal matter. Marcus cleared his calendar. He met us in the small conference room next to his office. The one with the frosted glass. He listened for 40 minutes without speaking. He did not interrupt. He did not ask a single question until I was finished. When I was finished, he got up, walked to the door, closed it himself, sat back down, and said, "Elena, I have been waiting for you to come to me for 3 months." I stared at him. He said, "Our head of IT flagged your credentials in August. The pattern was obvious. We have cameras in this office you do not know about. We have cameras at every terminal. We have cameras in the server room. We have cameras in the hallway outside this conference room. I have watched your brother enter this building 47 times over the last 14 months. I have watched him use your credentials. I have watched him transfer money. I have a file on him that is 340 pages long." He paused. He looked at me. He said, "Elena, I needed you to come to me. I needed to know if you were a victim or a participant. I am sorry for what you have been through. I am very, very glad you are here." I did not know what to do with my hands. Abraham did. He said, "Mr. Hartwell, we appreciate your discretion. We would like to propose a coordinated disclosure to federal authorities." Marcus nodded. He said, "My outside counsel has already drafted the referral. We can file by end of week. There is one additional thing I want Elena to know." He looked at me. He said, "I have not told a single person on my staff what I know. Not one. Your job is safe. Your reputation is intact. When this becomes public, it will become public on terms we choose. Do you understand me?" I nodded. I could not speak. He said, "Good. Now go back to your desk and act completely normal. We have work to do." The FBI opened a formal case 3 weeks later. Special Agent Teresa Okafor was assigned. She was 39. She had worked white-collar fraud in the Chicago field office for 11 years. She met with me, Abraham, and went in a small conference room at the Dirksen Federal Building on Dearborn. She had already read Wen's forensic report. She asked me 47 questions. I answered every one. At the end, she said, "Ms. Marchetti, I want to thank you for your cooperation. I also want to tell you that based on what I have seen, your brother is looking at federal charges that carry a sentencing range of 51 to 63 months. Your mother, as a co-signer on the receiving account and a named registered agent on the LLC, is looking at charges that could carry 18 to 24 months. I want you to understand what you are doing before you go further." "Do you want to go further?" I looked at her. I thought about my mother's face when she introduced me at parties. I thought about Dominic drinking my wine and asking who had administrator access. I thought about the 84-year-old client, and the 91-year-old client, and the dead woman whose family had not yet closed her account. I said, "Yes. I want to go further." Agent Okafor nodded. She said, "Okay. Then here is what happens next." What happened next was this. For 4 months, I wore a recording device to every Sunday dinner. I wore it tucked into the lining of my purse. I wore it on Christmas. I wore it on my father's birthday in February. I wore it on the Sunday my mother handed Dominic a fresh envelope of what she called walking around money and laughed when he kissed her cheek. I wore it on the Sunday my father asked me, for the first time in 14 months, a question about my job. He asked, "Elena, does your company have any kind of audit coming up?" I said, "Not that I know of, Dad, why?" He said, "Just curious." My mother changed the subject. I wrote that exchange verbatim into the notebook that night. I underlined it 3 times. Dominic got careless in the final weeks. He had started spending openly. A new car. A trip to Cabo with a woman whose name I never learned. A Rolex. My mother wore a new diamond bracelet to Easter dinner. My father bought a new truck. They thought they had found a river that would not run dry. They did not understand that the river had already been dammed, and what they were drinking was the last of the standing water. I kept smiling. I kept eating the gravy. I kept calling on Sundays. It was the hardest 4 months of my life. I lost 9 pounds. I started grinding my teeth in my sleep. Nina made me see a therapist. The therapist was a woman named Dr. Ingrid Solberg, who had worked with victims of family fraud for 20 years. She said to me in our first session, "Elena, you are going to feel like a liar. You are not a liar. You are a woman who has finally decided to stop performing for an audience that never once clapped. There is a difference. Try to remember it." I wrote that sentence on a post-it note. I stuck it to my bathroom mirror. I read it every morning. 3 weeks ago, on a Wednesday in October, my mother called me at 4:47 p.m. Her voice was high and bright. It was the voice she used when she wanted something. She said, "Elena, your father and I are coming downtown tomorrow. We would love to take you to lunch." What a treat, right? A family lunch. I said, "Tomorrow is a Thursday, Mom. I have meetings." She said, "We will come to your office. 12:30. We want to see where you work, finally. It is about time." I hung up. I sat at my desk for a long moment. Then I called Abraham. I said, "It is happening tomorrow." He said, "Elena, are you sure?" I said, "She has never asked to see my office in 3.5 years. She is not coming to see me. She is coming to do something else." He said, "Call Marcus. Call Agent Okafor. Get the team in place by morning." I called Marcus. He said, "Come to my office now." I took the elevator up. He was already on the phone with his outside counsel. He hung up when I walked in. He said, "Elena, I want to ask you something, and I want you to take your time answering. Do you want to be present when this happens?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you sure? It will not be easy." I said, "Marcus, I have been eating Sunday dinner with these people for a year knowing exactly what they did. Tomorrow is the easy part." He smiled for the first time that day. He said, "Okay. Then here is how we do it." The next morning, I wore a navy suit. I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings. My father's mother, not my mother's. She had given them to me before she died, when I was 17. She had said, "Elena, the world will try to make you small. Do not let them. You are my quiet one. That is your strength, not your weakness." I had not worn the earrings in 3 years. I put them on at 7:15 a.m. I looked at myself in the mirror. I said out loud, to no one, "Today you stop performing." I went to work. I answered emails. I took a meeting with a client at 10. I took another at 11:15. At 12:20, Marcus's assistant, a woman named Rosa who had worked at Hartwell for 16 years, appeared at my desk. She said quietly, "They are in the lobby. Your mother and your father. Your mother is asking for Mr. Hartwell by name." I nodded. I stood up. I walked to the elevator bank. I rode up 1 floor to the 32nd. I went into the small conference room next to Marcus's office. The one with the frosted glass. Agent Okafor was already there, in plain clothes, sitting at the table with a folder in front of her. Abraham was there. Wen was there. Marcus was there. A second federal agent whose name I did not know was there. Marcus's outside counsel, a woman named Patricia Chen, was there. Marcus looked at me. He said, "Ready?" I said, "Yes." He nodded to Rosa through the glass. Rosa picked up the phone in the reception area on the 31st floor. She said, Mr. Hartwell will see you now. Please come up to the 32nd floor. I will meet you at the elevators. I sat down. I did not face the door. I faced the window. I watched the river. My hands were steady. Agent Okafor whispered, "You are doing great. Just let it unfold." The elevator chimed. I heard my mother's voice in the hallway. She was laughing. She was saying, "Oh, it is such a beautiful office. My daughter, she works so hard." My father was silent. He always was. Rosa led them to the large conference room, the one with the view of the lake, 2 doors down from where I was sitting. Marcus had arranged it that way deliberately. He wanted them comfortable. He wanted them confident. He wanted them to deliver the folder before they knew anyone was watching. Through the glass of my conference room, I could see a sliver of theirs. I could see my mother settle into a chair. I could see her place a manila folder on the table. She smoothed the front of it with one hand. My father sat next to her. He looked at his phone. Marcus entered. He shook both their hands warmly. He sat across from them. He said, "Gianna, Silvio. Thank you for coming in. Rosa mentioned you had something important to discuss." My mother leaned forward. I could hear her clearly because Marcus had left his office door slightly open, and the wall between the rooms was thin. She said, "Marcus. May I call you Marcus? We are family friends now, in a way. I am here because I love my daughter. I need you to understand that everything I am about to tell you, I am telling you because I love her, and because I love this firm, and because I have been losing sleep for months over what to do." Marcus said, "Please. Go ahead." My mother opened the folder. She slid it across the table. She said, "Marcus, my daughter Elena has been stealing from your clients." I did not want to believe it. My husband did not want to believe it. But the evidence is overwhelming. There are wire transfers. There are records. We have been compiling this for months. She paused. She put on a face of performed grief. She said, "We love Elena. But she has a gambling problem we have been trying to help her with. She has lost control. We believe she has taken over $300,000 from this firm. We wanted you to know before it became public, so you could handle it quietly. So Elena could get help." I closed my eyes. I had not known the gambling piece. They had invented a gambling problem to explain a crime they had committed. They had been rehearsing this for weeks. They had probably rehearsed it at the kitchen table. They had probably sat at the same table where I had eaten Sunday gravy and performed grief at each other until it sounded real. My father spoke for the first time. He said, "Mr. Hartwell, we are good people. Our daughter is sick. We hope you will handle this with discretion." Marcus was silent for 11 seconds. I counted. Then he said, "Gianna. Silvio. I want to thank you for coming here today. I want to thank you for the folder. I want to tell you that I have read every document inside it already. I received a copy from a source 2 weeks ago. I am going to tell you something now, and I need you to listen very carefully." My mother's smile faltered. She said, "I don't understand." Marcus said, "For the last 14 months, our internal security team has been monitoring unauthorized access to our client management system using Elena's credentials. We have security footage of every unauthorized entry. We know who entered this building. We know when. We know what they did. We know where the money went. We know whose maiden name is on the receiving account at a credit union in Cicero." My mother's face went white. My father stopped looking at his phone. Marcus said, "Gianna. I have a photograph here of your signature on the LLC formation documents for Marchetti Consulting Solutions. Dated August 14th of last year. Would you like to see it?" My mother stood up. She said, "This is outrageous. I am leaving." Marcus said, "Please sit down, Gianna. There is someone in the building I want you to meet before you go. He pressed a button on the phone on the table. The door of the conference room 2 doors down opened. Agent Okafor stood up. She walked past the glass of my conference room. I saw her pass. I stood up too. I followed her. Abraham walked beside me. Wen walked beside him. We walked in a single quiet line down the hallway toward the conference room where my mother was still standing, one hand on the back of the chair, her mouth slightly open, and my father was looking up at the ceiling as if waiting for it to fall. I walked in first. My mother saw me. Her face did something I had never seen it do before. It collapsed inward. All at once. Like a building losing its load-bearing wall. She said, "Elena. What are you doing here?" Her voice had lost the brightness. It had lost the performance. It was thin and small and afraid. I did not answer her. I sat down at the table. I faced her across it. Agent Okafor sat down next to me. She placed her badge on the table. She said, "Mrs. Marchetti." "Mr. Marchetti. My name is Special Agent Teresa Okafor with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I need you to sit down. Both of you. Right now." My mother sat down slowly. My father sat down beside her. Agent Okafor slid 2 documents across the table. She said, "These are target letters from the United States Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois. Mrs. Marchetti, you are named as a co-conspirator in a federal wire fraud and money laundering investigation. Mr. Marchetti, you are named as a person of interest. Your son Dominic was taken into custody 14 minutes ago at a restaurant in River North where he was having lunch with a business associate. He is being transported to the federal building on Dearborn as we speak." My mother started crying. It was the first real crying I had ever seen her do. Her shoulders shook. Her mascara ran. She reached for my hand across the table. I moved my hand. I placed it in my lap. I said, "No, Mom." It was the first word I had spoken in the room. She said, "Elena, please. Please. Tell them you lied. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We are your family." I looked at her. I looked for a long time. I said, "You came to my office today to destroy my career. You told my boss I was a criminal. You told him I had a gambling problem I do not have. You did all of that to cover for the son who has been stealing from 84-year-old clients using my name." I paused. "You are not my family today, Mom. You are a woman who made a choice. And I am a woman who made a different one." My father had not said a word. He was staring at the table. I looked at him. I said, "Dad. Did you know?" He did not answer. I said, "Dad. Look at me." He looked at me. His eyes were wet. He said, "Elena. I only knew some of it." I said, "Which parts?" He said, "I knew about the car. I knew about the trips. I did not ask where the money came from. I should have asked." I said, "Yes, Dad. You should have." Agent Okafor said, "Mrs. Marchetti, Mr. Marchetti. I need to read you both your rights." She did. She read them slowly and clearly. My mother wept through them. My father sat very still. When she finished, she said, "You are not under arrest today. But you will both be required to surrender to federal authorities within 72 hours with attorneys present. Do you understand?" They both nodded. She said, "I need you to say it out loud." They both said yes. Marcus stood up. He said, "Rosa will escort you downstairs. Please do not attempt to contact any employee of this firm, including Elena, until your attorneys have spoken with Ms. Chen. Is that clear?" They both nodded again. Rosa appeared at the door. She did not look at my mother or my father. She held the door open. They stood up. My mother tried one more time. She said, "Elena, I love you. I have always loved you. I said nothing. They walked out. The room was quiet for a long time. Marcus sat down. He put his hand over his face for 30 seconds. Then he looked up. He said, Elena, I want you to take the rest of the week off. Paid. When you come back, I want to talk to you about a promotion I have been sitting on for 4 months. I did not want to raise it while this was still moving. It can wait until next week. But I want you to know it is waiting. I nodded. I could not speak. Dominic was indicted 11 days later. The charges were federal wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. His public defender at the arraignment asked for a plea deal. The prosecutor laughed. The story was picked up by the Chicago Tribune on a Thursday. The headline was on page 3 of the business section. It read, Son and mother charged in $312,000 client fund scheme at Hartwell Financial. My name was not in the article. Marcus had requested it. The reporter had agreed. The article named Dominic Marchetti, 33, and Gianna Marchetti, 58. It described the scheme in 3 paragraphs. It quoted Marcus saying, Hartwell Financial's internal controls detected this activity early. No client lost a single dollar. Every account has been made whole from firm reserves as of this morning. We are cooperating fully with federal authorities. My mother was arraigned 2 days after Dominic. She pleaded not guilty at first. Her attorney advised her to change the plea within a week. She did. She took a plea deal for 18 months at a minimum security facility in Pekin. She would serve 14 if she behaved. She did not speak to me on the phone from County Holding. I did not answer when she tried. My father was not charged criminally. The prosecutor determined his involvement did not rise to the level of conspiracy, but the investigation had found that he had known about the new truck, the new watch, the new car, and had not asked. He was forced to close his insurance brokerage within 60 days. The state revoked his license to sell commercial insurance, citing an unrelated matter they had been sitting on for 3 years. He moved into a small apartment in Berwyn. I heard about it from my cousin Mateo, who called me one Sunday night. Dominic pleaded guilty 3 months after his arrest. He was sentenced to 54 months at a federal facility in Terre Haute. He tried to write me a letter from prison. It was 8 pages long. Abraham opened it, read the first paragraph, and advised me to return it unopened. I did. I wrote my return address as addressee refused and mailed it back myself from the post office on Chicago Avenue. I did not cry when I dropped it in the slot. I had cried enough by then. Marcus promoted me on the Tuesday after I came back to work. The new title was Vice President of Private Client Services. The salary was $187,000. The promotion included a signing bonus of $40,000, which Marcus said was meant to cover the legal fees I had paid Abraham and went out of my own pocket. I had not asked him to cover them. He had asked Rosa to quietly request the invoices from Abraham's office. He paid them directly. He said, when he handed me the letter, Elena, what you did took a kind of courage I have met exactly twice in my career. I am honored you work here. I am honored you chose us. Do not ever doubt your place in this firm again. I cried in his office. He handed me a handkerchief. He said, keep it. I did keep it. It is folded in the top drawer of my desk. I look at it some mornings when the work is hard. 6 months after my mother reported to Pekin, I did something I did not expect to do. I wrote her a letter. I wrote it in one sitting on a Sunday afternoon in my apartment. The letter was 3 paragraphs long. It said this, Mom. I am not writing to forgive you. I am writing because Dr. Solberg told me that a letter I never send can teach me what I actually believe. I believe you loved Dominic more than you loved me. I believe you knew what he was doing. I believe you signed those documents knowing exactly what you were signing. I believe you came to my office that day because you thought I would not fight back, because I had never fought back before, because you had built a lifetime of evidence that suggested I would fold. You were wrong about me. I am sorry for whatever made you need a child you could control more than a child you could love. I am not that child. I was never going to be. I hope Pekin is quiet. I hope you read books. I hope you think carefully about what you did. I will not be at the gate when you come out. Elena. I did not mail the letter. I filed it in a folder in my desk labeled closed. My father called me 2 weeks later. It was the first time he had called me in 6 months. He said, Elena. I am at a meeting. It is a program for family members of people in federal custody. I did not want to call you. The man leading the meeting said I should. I was quiet for a long time. I said, Dad, why did he say you should call? He said, because I was supposed to protect you, and I did not, and I need to say it to you out loud before I die. He was crying. I had not heard my father cry in my entire life. I sat on the edge of my couch. I said, Dad. I am listening. He talked for 47 minutes. He said everything I had ever needed him to say. He said he had watched my mother favor Dominic for 33 years and had told himself it was just the way she was. He said he had watched me graduate from college alone and had told himself I preferred it that way. He said he had asked me the question about an audit because Dominic had asked him to ask, and he had not thought hard enough about why. He said he was sorry. He said he did not expect forgiveness. He said he only wanted me to know that he knew. I said, thank you, Dad. I hear you. I did not say I forgave him. I was not ready. I said, call me next Sunday if you want to. He said he would. He did. He has called every Sunday since. We talk for 20 minutes. It is the longest conversation we have ever had on any regular basis. He does not ask about my mother. I do not ask about his apartment. We talk about the White Sox. We talk about the weather. Once, he asked me what I was reading. I told him. He read the same book. We talked about it the next Sunday. It was the first book he and I had ever discussed. He is 62. I am 29. We are starting late. We are starting. A year after the confrontation, Marcus offered me a seat on Hartwell Financial's management committee. I accepted. I am now one of 4 voting members who shape the firm's strategy, compensation, and hiring. I sit in a chair my mother did not know existed in a building she will likely never enter again. On the wall of my new office, I hung 2 things. The first was my grandmother's pearl earrings, framed in a shadow box with a small card underneath that said, "You are my quiet one. That is your strength." The second was the post-it note Dr. Solberg's sentence had been written on, the one I had kept on my bathroom mirror for 4 months. I had it laminated. It sits on my desk now, face up, where I can see it every day. Nina and Priya had a baby last spring. A girl. They named her Elena Grace. Nina called me from the hospital at 4:14 a.m. She said, "She is here. She is perfect. You are her godmother." That is not a question. I cried into the phone. Priya laughed in the background. I drove to the hospital. I held the baby for 40 minutes. She slept through all of it. Her small hand curled around my finger. Nina watched me hold her. Nina said, "Elena, your mother does not get to take this from you. Do you understand?" I said, "I understand." I held the baby longer. I go to see my therapist Dr. Solberg every other Thursday. She has taught me that the story I grew up inside of was not the only story available. She has taught me that the quiet ones are not waiting to speak. They are waiting to be asked a question that deserves a true answer, and when no one asks, the quiet ones learn to stop offering. She has taught me that what I did with my family was not revenge. It was the correct response to a crime. She has taught me the difference. It is a Sunday in April now. The last Sunday I will write about in this story. I am in my kitchen in Ukrainian village. The window is open. The air smells like rain coming in off the lake. I am making gravy. My grandmother's recipe. Not my mother's. My grandmother taught me in her own kitchen when I was 11, before she died, before I knew anything about what my family would become. She stood behind me at the stove. She put her hand on my shoulder. She said, "Elena, taste it. Do not trust the recipe. Trust your tongue." I have used her recipe every Sunday for the last 8 months. It is the thing I have taken back. My father is coming for dinner at 5:30. It is the first time he has been to my apartment. He will bring bread from the bakery on Grand Avenue, because that is what he knows how to do. Nina and Priya are coming at 6 with Elena Grace, who is 11 months old now and has started calling me Lena. My doorman will buzz them all up. My father will meet my goddaughter for the first time. He will hold her carefully. I already know this because I asked him last week if he would like to hold her, and he said, "Elena, I would be honored." He said it like it cost him something to say, and I understood, finally, that it did. I want to tell you something now, because I think it is the only honest thing I know how to say. If you have grown up being the quiet one in a family that did not deserve your silence, I want you to hear this. Your silence was never weakness. Your patience was never cowardice. The fact that you did not fight back for years does not mean you were not paying attention. It means you were paying closer attention than anyone in that family ever understood. And one day, when the moment comes, you will know what to do. You will not need a script. You will not need permission. You will only need the truth you have been keeping carefully, quietly, in a green composition book on a shelf no one ever looked at. I stir the gravy. It is almost ready. The buzzer rings. My father is early. He is 12 minutes early. He has never been early for anything in his life. I walk to the door. I press the button. I say, "Come up, Dad." I unlock the door. I go back to the stove. I taste the gravy. My grandmother was right. It is better than the recipe. I turn the burner down. I wait for my father's footsteps in the hallway outside. When they come, they are slower than I remember. He is getting older. I am getting older. The door opens. He stands there holding a paper bag from the bakery. He does not say anything. He just looks at me. He looks at me the way I had wanted him to look at me my whole life. Like he was finally seeing who I had always been. He says, "Elena." "Hi." I say, "Hi, Dad." "Come in." He comes in. He sets the bread on the counter. He looks around my apartment for a full minute. He says, "It is a beautiful place you have made here." I say, "Thank you, Dad." And that is where I want to end this story. Not in a courtroom. Not in a conference room. Not with a badge on a table or a folder full of wires. But in a kitchen on a Sunday in April, with my grandmother's gravy on the stove, and my father standing in my doorway with bread, and me, finally, at 29 years old, at home in my own life. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you will really enjoy them. And do not forget to subscribe if you have not already. See you in the next story.